Now, the press conference will start. Over to you, Foreign Minister. First of all, in response to the situation in Iran, as part of assistance to Japanese nationals wishing to leave the Gulf region, I would like to give the update of the government actions. And first, on the 8th, the charter flight leaving Muscat of Oman, which arrived in Narita. And on the 10th morning, from Saudi Arabia, from Riyadh, another the flight, a chartered flight arrived at Narita. In total, the 388 Japanese nationals boarded the chartered flights from UAE, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. And 16 Japanese nationals evacuated from land routes from Iran, and 5 on land routes from Israel.
There are still people who wish to depart there, so we will continue supporting the departure. Specifically, we are preparing to arrange the Japanese government chartered aircrafts to depart from Riyadh of Saudi Arabia and Dubai of UAE respectively on 10th and 11th Japan time. MOFA will continue making utmost efforts in preparing for safe departure of all people who wish to depart from those countries. Among those who wish to depart, for example, they transport to Riyadh by land, and they want to stay in Riyadh and observe the situation for a while. There are such people. So on a day-to-day basis, the number of those who wish to come back to Japan changes. So appropriately, we would like to grasp those numbers and prepare for the support.
So please raise your hand if you have a question, and please proceed into the stand on the microphone and to ask a question. Onda-san of Kyodo News. Thank you. My name's Onda. With regard to the scheduled visit by Prime Minister to the United States, and Prime Minister Takaichi stated at the Budget Committee yesterday that you are also going to accompany. What is going to be the take on the possible visit? If the situation permits, I will accompany Prime Minister Takaichi, who will visit the United States. Regarding the upcoming Japan-US summit, it will be an occasion the two leaders will further strengthen relations of trust, which was reconfirmed in the previous meeting in October, and enhance the bilateral relations in all aspects across national security and economic insecurity. So those top leaders are going to use this opportunity to reconfirm this. And there is a worsening international situation, including Iran and the Middle East. The Prime Minister will convey Japan's positions on that situation, and the two leaders are also expected to engage in detailed discussions over those topics. The summit will also be an occasion to reaffirm Japan-US commitment and to FOIP, which is the pillar of Japan's diplomacy. With regard to the schedule of the summit meeting, it is being arranged at the moment. But with regard to the sideline events, there is also unfixed issues that need to be addressed. So for the time being, about the foreign ministers meeting, it is not yet decided yet at this point.
Sankei Nakahara-san. Sankei Nagahara. Yesterday, you had a telephone dialogue with Iranian Foreign Minister Araguchi, urging an early de-escalation of the situation. Prior to this, you also had a telephone talk with the Israel Foreign Minister. Given Japan's position to communicate with both the U.S. and Israel, as well as Iran, how does the minister intend to contribute to resolving this conflict? So amidst the ongoing exchange of attacks and deteriorating situation across the entire region, the most important thing is to de-escalate the situation early on. For that end, as you pointed out, communication with countries concerned, relevant countries on future responses and outlook is extremely important. So every day, we engage in proactive diplomacy. First of all, immediately after the incident occurred on March 1st in the morning, we held G7 foreign ministers telephone conference and received explanation on the latest trend back then and the outlook by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, while conveying our country's perspective, Japan's perspective from me, and exchange opinions among G7 countries. Furthermore, with the Israeli Foreign Minister Sal and with the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi, I had a meeting many times on the 6th with the Israeli Foreign Minister Sal, and yesterday with the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi. We had a telephone dialogue and directly and strongly urged early de-escalation of the situation. In addition, I had communication with the foreign ministers of Gulf state and to Israel as well as to Iran. I communicated for the wishes to early escalation of the situation. This was not the first meeting, so I believe they understood my message as well as my thought. So as I mentioned, with prime ministers and foreign ministers of Gulf states, we continue communicating. And through close coordination with the international community for the early de-escalation of the situation, we would like to continue making all possible diplomatic efforts.
Next question, please.
Panoramic News, Azahari-san.
Thank you, Mr. Khadwan Azari, Panoramic News. It's just follow-up to my colleague question. Given the situation, looming crisis in the energy security for Japan, do you think Japan is going to take more initiative, real initiative toward the escalation of the situation other than like condemning Iran or talking to your counterparts? Like Japan has good relations with everybody there. So Japan is in a good position to make real action on the ground there. And also Iran has elected a new leader. What is Japan's position on that? We know that the United States didn't approve it because it seems like the United States can decide who's going to rule Iran. So what is Japan's position on that? Thank you.
This may overlap with the previous question, but most important thing is the early de-escalation of the situation. Through this, starting with the Gulf of Hormuz, or Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf region's safety can be secured. In case of oil, more than 90%, and for LNG, a little over 10% of LNG, we depend on the region. So from the energy security perspective, the de-escalation of the situation is extremely important. And as to the election of new leader of Iran, since it is the internal matters of other countries, I would like to refrain from making comments. But at any rate, we will continue watching the domestic trend in Iran.
Next question, Hamamoto-san of IWJ. This is Hamamoto speaking. Thank you. It is going to be an overlapping question. It is about the Iran situation. There were two oil crises that Japan experienced. There was no de facto blockade of the Hormuz. However, it is being de facto blocked. And so more than the previous oil crisis, it is now facing unprecedented crisis. In addition to that, a trilemma of weaker yen, JGBs, and stock prices, there is a possibility of hyperinflation expected in Japan. And with regard to the options of diplomatic actions, that were introduced, but you mentioned that your view was different from my take. So once again, I would like to listen to your views. Probably the market is also expecting your view. Well, what is the last part? The market is expecting actions from Foreign Minister Motegi as well. If I may add, in response to the question at the last press conference, the policy needs to be changed. That's what you were arguing about. And Ukraine is in a very difficult situation. And therefore, in the international community, at the G7, we are cooperating with those member countries in order to provide assistance to Ukraine, and the sanctions against Russia would continue. Therefore, I said my view was different. With regard to the situation on the Strait of Hormuz, there were a series of questions. I have been closely following it in a series of meetings. I have been working and to realize the safe passage of the strait and the adjacent seas, which I have been working for long. The safeage of the safe passage of the strait and adjacent seas. I will continue to cooperate with the other ministries. And with regard to the possible impact on the national economy, there are different outlooks that are available, but going forward, how the oil price is going to unfold, this is going to be something that we need to closely monitor the market situation. We will continue to cooperate with the other relevant ministries in order to minimize any possible impact on the economy. We will be ready to take appropriate actions. Any other questions? If not, this is the end of the press conference. Thank you very much.